The Thompson family, John, Mary and their daughter Lily, had just moved into their new home. They were excited about the fresh start and the new memories they would create in this charming abode. It was a quaint two-storey Victorian house on the edge of town, with a picturesque garden and a welcoming front porch. The house had an old-world charm that captivated them from the moment they saw it. Little did they know, their dream home harboured a dark secret within its walls. The house had stood for over a century, witnessing countless stories, some of which were better left untold. That evening, the family settled into their routine. The cosy living room was filled with warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the cold, eerie night outside. John read the newspaper by the fireplace, the crackling fire providing a comforting background noise. Mary prepared dinner in the kitchen, humming a soft tune, and Lily played with her dolls in the living room, her giggles echoing through the house. The aroma of chicken casserole filled the air, mingling with the scent of burning wood from the fireplace, creating a sense of homely comfort. It was a stark contrast to the unsettling events that were about to unfold. As the night deepened, a subtle yet unnerving sound reached John's ears. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder and more persistent. It was a faint scratching coming from the ceiling, like tiny claws scraping against the wood. He dismissed it as an animal, perhaps a squirrel or a bird that had found its way into the attic. But deep down, a sense of unease began to creep in, hinting that something was not quite right. The scratching continued each night, always after the sun had set and the house was enveloped in darkness. It was never loud enough to pinpoint, seeming to shift and move throughout the ceiling like some unseen entity was pacing above them. "Do you hear that?" Mary asked one evening, her brow furrowed with worry. John, now accustomed to the unsettling rhythm, merely nodded, attempting to downplay his own growing concern. They initially attributed the noises to rats. The house, after all, was old and had been vacant for quite some time before they moved in. They set traps, sealed any potential entry points, and hoped for the best. But the scratching persisted, seemingly unfazed by their efforts. It was as if something was listening, watching, becoming bolder with each passing night. As days turned into weeks, the scratching transformed. It wasn't the sound of claws on wood anymore. It was something far more unsettling. It began subtly, like the wind whistling through a crack, but it gradually morphed, evolving into hushed whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. One night, Lily woke up crying. "Mummy, Daddy, I hear someone talking," she sobbed, clutching her teddy bear tightly. John and Mary rushed to her side, their hearts pounding in their chests. They listened intently, their breath catching in their throats as they realized the horrifying truth. The whispers were faint, but undoubtedly human, and they were filled with an unspeakable malice that sent shivers down their spines. The whispers seemed to originate from the air vent in the hallway upstairs. It was an old, rusted thing, its metal grille covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. John cautiously approached the vent, his heart pounding in his chest. He placed his ear against the cold metal, listening intently. The whispers intensified, swirling around him like a vortex of despair. They were unintelligible, yet filled with raw emotion, fear, anger, and something else, something darker, more sinister that he couldn't quite place. He felt a cold draft emanating from the vent, sending goosebumps crawling across his skin. It was as if something on the other side was breathing, watching, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. One particularly harrowing night, as the whispers echoed through the house, John noticed something peculiar. A faint glimmer of light flickered within the vent like a tiny star winking in the abyss. He squinted, his heart pounding in his chest. The light flickered again, this time a little brighter, revealing a sliver of what lay beyond the metal grille. John grabbed a flashlight from the nearby drawer and climbed onto a chair. He pointed the beam of light into the vent, his hand trembling slightly. At that moment, the whispers ceased. The house fell deathly silent, the air thick with anticipation. John held his breath, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Section 6. The Hand. As John peered into the darkness, his heart skipped a beat. There, in the faint glow of his flashlight, he saw it, a hand. It was pale, almost translucent, with long, bony fingers that seemed to stretch on forever. It emerged from the darkness within the vent, its fingers slowly curling around the edge of the metal grille. John gasped, his body frozen in terror. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the hand, its grip tightening on the vent as if it were trying to pull itself through. The hand remained suspended there, frozen in time, its presence sending a wave of icy dread washing over John. He felt a primal fear grip him, a deep-seated terror that he had never experienced before. Section 7. Frozen in Terror. John stood there for what felt like an eternity, his body locked in a state of paralysis. The room around him seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive with each passing second. His mind raced, but his limbs refused to respond as if they were no longer his own. The hand remained, its presence a tangible manifestation of the horrors that lurked within the walls of their home. It was as if the very essence of fear had taken a physical form, reaching out to claim him. The air grew colder, and John could feel the icy tendrils of dread wrapping around his heart. He wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there and stare at the grotesque appendage that had invaded their sanctuary. His throat tightened, and his voice seemed to be trapped somewhere deep within, unable to break free. The terror was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. But his body refused to obey, his mind trapped in a spiral of fear and disbelief. Every muscle was tense, every nerve on edge, yet he remained rooted to the spot. His hands trembled uncontrollably, a physical manifestation of the inner turmoil that raged within him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of John's own ragged breathing. Each breath was a struggle, a desperate attempt to draw in air that seemed to grow thinner and colder with each passing moment. The room felt alive with malevolent energy, as if it were feeding off his fear. Each inhale was a struggle, each exhale a testament to the terror that threatened to consume him. His lungs burned, his heart pounded, and his vision blurred as the panic took hold. It was a battle just to keep breathing, to keep from being overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of his fear. He knew he had to do something to protect his family from whatever evil was lurking within their home. The thought of his loved ones gave him a glimmer of strength, a reason to fight against the paralyzing fear. He couldn't let this malevolent force take them, not without a fight. But what could he do? The question echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of his helplessness. He felt lost, adrift in a sea of terror with no clear path to safety. Yet, deep down, he knew he had to find a way to summon the courage to face the darkness and protect those he loved. Section 8. Aftermath. Suddenly, as quickly as it had appeared, the hand retreated back into the darkness. It was as if the shadows themselves had come alive, reaching out to touch the world of the living before vanishing into the void. The vent creaked shut, as if nothing had happened, leaving John standing there in the eerie silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with an unspoken tension. He remained frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to process the events that had just transpired. The surreal nature of it all made him question his own sanity. The silence was almost as unnerving as the whispers and the hand, a heavy blanket of dread smothering any hope of rationality. It was as if the house itself was watching, waiting for his next move. Finally, John managed to tear himself away from the vent. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the oppressive quiet. He stumbled back, his legs feeling like jelly. The adrenaline that had surged through him moments before was now replaced by a paralyzing fear. He had to tell Mary, to warn Lily, to get them out of this house. The urgency of the situation gripped him, pushing him to move despite his trembling limbs. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something even more terrifying. His breath caught in his throat and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Scratched into the dusty floor beneath the vent were 3 words, etched with an almost inhuman precision. The message was clear, and it sent a shiver down his spine, leaving him with a sense of impending doom. Section 9, A chilling silence, we hear you too.